question for you. Has gentrification changed your neighbourhood? Are there a bunch of hipsters moving in? Are you one of them? There are two main arguments here. Those that say gentrification has pushed poor people out of their neighbourhoods, and those that say rich people bring in resources that benefit everyone. Who's right? And is gentrification really that bad? Well, tonight we're going to find out, and as always, we'll break down the issue using facts, figures, dollars and cents. I'm joined by a panel of renowned experts eager to answer the question, what is the business of gentrification? Right, well, let's bring up a statistic. 96%. That's the increase in home values within a quarter mile of a Starbucks over the past 17 years. But the average increase for other homes was just 65%. Lance, I want to start off with you. We just want to kind of set the basic terms of this debate. What do you mean when you say gentrification?
Well, the term refers to neighborhoods in central cities. Usually you have an older, relatively poor neighborhood that experiences an influx of higher socioeconomic status individuals and investment.
Baratunde, did Lance miss anything in that definition?
Yeah, I think he missed a key ingredient, which is the increased availability of kale on the menus of the restaurants in the neighborhood. That's kind of how you know gentrification's happening.
John, which comes first, the gentrification or the Starbucks?
Well, Starbucks is really smart at figuring out which neighborhoods are going there and people buy there.
Yeah.
And, you know, someone, I've been pushed out of a couple neighborhoods, sort of, but I still think gentrification is a great thing.
You think it's a great thing?
Yeah, even though it keeps pushing me out.
Well, let's take a look at the next slide because it kind of illustrates some of the arguments for the positive benefits. 11 points. That's the increase in credit score for residents living in gentrifying neighbourhoods. Can we explain how exactly those credit scores go up?
It may be due to people getting better jobs, or perhaps if they're homeowners, the value of their homes increases. If you're fortunate enough to own your own home and you live in a gentrifying neighborhood, that's going to improve your economic status.
John, cities change, right? All of that stuff is just natural, isn't it?
The neighborhoods go through these cycles and, you know, the housing deteriorates, the artists move in, and then the neighborhood picks up again. And that's what's great about New York. It always welcomes new groups of immigrants in neighborhoods.
I want to challenge this notion that this is something that just naturally happens. Black people were put in specific housing situations, to be specific about New York, denied home loans, denied opportunities.
Yeah.
So the idea that this is some natural evolution, no, these are policy decisions that we're seeing play out.
John, do you agree with that analysis?
No, I mean, I agree that there were some government policies that encourage the suburb. But in general, these things happen organically.
We can't ignore the racial history of that too, which is, I like my all-white neighborhood. I can't legally discriminate in schools anymore, so I'm gonna go to a new district and have it happen to be all white, which is by the law okay, but in practice, still segregationist.
Do you think it's just an organic phenomenon, or do you think policies have created gentrification?
If you want to call it organic or natural, there have been some changes. People are marrying later, people are having fewer children, and when they do have children, they're likely to be older. City living is much more appealing to that demographic, and that demographic is getting bigger over time.
We've talked about the winners of gentrification, but let's talk about who loses out. 75% of the neighbourhoods that had high poverty in 1970 were still suffering from high rates of poverty in 2010. John, this statistic shows you can have gentrification and poverty in the exact same place, doesn't it?
Cities, the whole point of cities really is to turn poor people into middle-class people. You know, young people go there, you know, poor immigrants go there and they learn skills, they make connections, they get jobs, and that's what you want to happen in cities.
But Baratunde, that's not how it actually works in practice, is it?
Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. You will have a situation where grandma owned a house, right? And then multiple generations lived in that house. Somebody comes knocking on the door, I got a great deal for you. It's a slick-talking, smooth salesperson who gets that house from grandma. Is there a world where grandma can still own the house and keep that wealth in that community so that they are not on the other side of those numbers?
But what if grandma wants to make money on that house?
And she's not necessarily thinking about how she's changing the community by her decision. She's just trying to make the right economic decision for her, right?
And if it's better for her, I'd say, you know, let grandma make money.
Grandma should get paid. Like, I'm not hating on grandma. I would never do that. I would never do that. Because neighborhood change is natural. I don't want to say everything should always be static, no change is bad. I disagree, I like change. But the speed of it seems to be accelerating. And the pace at which money moves in the world and the pace at which these buildings are going up, that's almost a form of violence in my mind.
Okay, I want to see if there are any other questions from the audience. Right here.
Hi, my name is David. I was just wondering, if I were to move into a poorer neighborhood, even if that's all I can afford, would that make me a gentrifier?
John, what would you say to someone like David?
I'll defer to the professor on this.
I mean, I would want to know a little bit more about David. I don't know his education, his income, where he was living before.
We're not going to make you describe all that, don't worry, David. Yeah.
So if he was highly educated, then that would be, I would say, yeah, he's a gentrifier. He's helping gentrify the neighborhood.
Should he feel guilty?
David, you're not guilty. Okay, not yet. I think it depends on David's attitude. Do you see the people who've been there as a threat to be cleared away, or as your friends, your potential colleagues and members of your community? I think that mindset is part of why we see this clash and why gentrification has a dirty word. Because some people show up feeling like what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine, and they're not actually joining a community. They're imposing their sense of community on top of what's already been there.
We're filming this show in Bushwick, Brooklyn, a neighbourhood that is definitely gentrifying, so our next stat really strikes close to home. $2,428 a month. That's the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment here in Bushwick. A 1-bedroom apartment here will go for $2,189 a month, and a studio is $1,925 a month. John, why is rent so high? Is it a housing shortage? Is it too much demand?
It's terrible housing policies in New York City. I mean, the key to providing affordable housing is building housing. And when there's a shortage, poor people suffer the most.
I think seeing this chart of increasing cost of living and knowing that it's taking up a bigger share of our income, if we were all making more money, these numbers wouldn't feel so painful, but we're not.
So who can afford these prices?
A lot of people who maybe they sold a house in the suburb, maybe they have parents who can help chip in because they have some level of a family cushion or wealth, or maybe they're tripling, quadrupling up to be able to live in the same spot. So on paper, it looks like a $2,500 apartment for 2, but inside there's 4 or 5 people living there.
Baratunde, me and you actually both live in the same neighbourhood of Brooklyn, and it's a neighbourhood that has changed a lot. Aren't we part of the problem?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the beauty of this topic, is that there's no pure villains or pure heroes. Like, we all have these shades of gray going on inside of us.
Well, I want to bring up a stat on exactly this.
Yeah.
Activists often complain that gentrification actually means white people with money pushing poor people of colour out of their homes. More than 9,500. That's the number of white people living here in Bushwick, and it's a number that tripled between 2000 and 2010. Baratunde, this shows that it's just a racial element to this, right?
Very few things are all about race. This is definitely a lot about money. This is a lot about business growth. This is a lot about people using real estate as an investment vehicle rather than as a home, because you have more capability to do that.
There is an overlap between class and race, but it's not 100%. There's a concern that the neighborhood would lose its character, that would become overwhelmingly predominantly white. But I think if you talk to people in these communities, they don't necessarily have an issue with some whites moving into the neighborhood. It's about what happens after they move in, and how do the people who come in behave towards them. Do they feel like the people coming in are trying to take over the neighborhood, or are they coming in to be part of the community?
Are there any other questions in the audience?
As gentrification completely spreads out throughout my area, I want to know, is this something that's isolated only throughout the big cities and around the coastal area, or is this ubiquitous?
You watch South Park? All right, so South Park is this small town. They have a negative image, and they want to improve their image in the eyes of the world. So according to their theory, they need to get a Whole Foods. Because Whole Foods means you're progressive, you're crunchy, you're future forward, all those buzzwords. So they create Soto Sopa, south of downtown South Park. And they end up bringing in all these fancy, upscale kind of nightclub vibes and the lofts at Soto Sopa. It's a great parody, but it's a real thing that's happening. It's not just the coast. And a lot of what's driving this from way far away isn't, I want to work in New York City and make it in the big leagues. It's that I want my money to be safe somewhere. I live in a country where maybe my financial markets aren't so secure. So I'm going to put my money in the one thing I know always goes up, for the most part, New York City real estate, or city real estate in general.
That does it for this edition of The Business of Life. I'd like to thank our panellists for joining us today, Baratunde, Lance and John, and all of you for watching. We'll see you next time on The Business of Life. Bye-bye.
Business of Life is made possible by Better Money Habits. It's a free resource that helps you build practical knowledge and take control of your finances. Powered by Bank of America. See more at bettermoneyhabits.com.